Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Now we are beginning the Q&A, questions and answers with guest speakers. A few announcements. Those of you who ask questions, please direct your questions and identify the speaker from whom you expect a response. That's one. And then if you just put up your hands, devotee friends will approach you, come to you and hand over you the mic and you can ask questions. And please be brief and focused in asking your questions. And yeah, that's important. If you want to make long statements, most welcome after the session is over. Because all of you will get opportunities to meet speakers. After the vote of thanks, we will have plenty of time to privately meet the speakers and discuss whatever you want to discuss with them. Most welcome. But when you ask questions, please be brief and focused. Those who want to ask questions, please put up your hands. Any kind of questions, except those dealing with some controversial political questions, can be avoided. Anything related to spirituality, religion, Swamiji Veetamohananda ji discussed, gave a brief idea of how Interfaith Movement is working in European continent. He travels all over the Europe, not only France and Spain, but different countries in Europe. So you can direct your questions to Swamiji. And Barbara O'Brien, of course, he dealt with different reflections of interfaith ideas in the literary traditions, different languages and traditions. So you can direct your questions. And those of you who want to ask questions to me, most welcome. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah, please.
My question.
Somebody started here. So yeah. Begin. Kamesh, begin here. Oh. Yeah. Please.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
This is for Barbara O'Brien. I have a question about Mary Baker Eddy. Is her concept of the divine mind analogous to or equal to the Nirguna Brahman concept in Vedanta? In other words, is it non-dual in her world, in her view?
Yes. Could someone repeat the question? Yeah.
Speak like this.
This is better? Yeah. Okay. My question has to do with Mary Baker Eddy.
Yes.
And her concept of the divine mind, all is mind.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about Brahman, the non-dual Nirguna Brahman, not the Saguna dualistic Brahman.
Yes.
Is her concept of the divine mind equal to or the same as Nirguna Brahman, or is it at some other dualistic level?
I would say it's at the non-dual level, yes.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. It's to anyone who wants to take the question. I was wondering if anyone has investigated the Baha'i principle of progressive revelation or investigated and share any reflections on the twin manifestations, the Bab and Baha'u'llah.
Is direct to any of us? It's about progressive revelations of the Supreme Truth. Well, I think it is more or less in a way similar to the Jewish prophetic tradition, where every commandment brings about a new paradigm of revelations. Every prophet brings forth a new paradigm. So the paradigm shift essentially is taken from the Jewish theological tradition when Thomas Kuhn wrote the famous book, the structural revolutions, of physics, science, in fact. So that's one view. Truth going on, progressing more and more of the reality getting revealed. But that is somewhat different from Vedantic tradition. In Vedantic tradition, once you realize the truth, once you experience the truth, you realize it in its wholeness, completeness. Progressive revelation of God's wisdom coming in installments, each representing a new paradigm, is somewhat alien to Advaita tradition, non-dualistic tradition. So
I shall try to answer you from the non-dualistic. Not working. I shall try to answer your question by the non-dualistic point of view. Absolute, it is pure consciousness itself. You may say, what is it, pure consciousness? How can we perceive it, know it? There is this possibility. Pure consciousness expresses itself as the harmony of pure energy. Not only physical energy, entire universal energy, it is the expression of pure consciousness. So, energy we certainly can feel it. Second aspect of it is luminosity. See, it is the energy at a particular degree of vibration expresses itself as luminosity. It's the same luminosity that is there in us. And then it is this luminosity that expresses itself as beauty. What we appreciate beauty everywhere, it is nothing but this beauty that expresses itself. The harmony of these three aspects put together, it is love. You may question, what is love? We know what is love in human relationships. No. What is called love, it is the expression of one's heart. Every cell molecule of your body gives that expression like waves. Perhaps you might be knowing from the bioscience, every cell has the capacity to express it. The cell has three aspects. One is material aspect. Inside it there is a space where all kinds of impressions are stored up through the antenna. A small antenna, microscopic. It is that receives. And through that, the force of love expresses itself. So, love is intelligence. You may say, how love is intelligence? When we love an object or whatever it is, we try to know why it is, how it is, from where it is. All sorts of questions come up. all questions of research starts developing. So that means through research, you want to know why, how, and when and where. That is the knowledge. That is the power of intelligence. That is why what is called love. Love is intelligence. Intelligence reveals the true knowledge. Here, there is difference between what is called manifest knowledge and direct experience. So it is the pure intelligence that expresses itself as knowledge. So when we know what is real, we are happy. This joy, inner joy, the Vedanta calls it Ananda, bliss. So in a way, we can experience it. Well then, in our everyday life, how are we to be progressive? It depends to the extent that we are able to bring these aspects in our personality. Generally, as you know it, we are away from these aspects. We are dominated by the material forces everywhere, every moment of our life. It is because of the dominance of material vibrations, this vibration becomes clouded or suppressed or contracted. So we can feel it. To the extent you take your consciousness to infinity. You may say, how am I to take my consciousness to infinity? For example, infinity like blue space. We can go on expanding our consciousness in the space. Well, you may say, space is not blue, but the color blue, it is the support to our consciousness to expand itself. So you have no limit to expand your consciousness in the space. Well, the infinite space, it is pure consciousness itself. So it is this pure consciousness, as I said, expresses itself as the harmony of pure energy. Is there no energy in the universe, in the galaxies, in the planets? Everywhere there is energy. It is the same energy, the same life force that expresses itself in this psychophysics. So, if we are able to connect ourselves to this infinite reality through the consciousness, it starts manifesting itself in our personality. So when this reality starts manifesting itself in our personality, your needs and wants become minimized. The inner emotions become lessened or harmonized. Agitations become less and less. Your love becomes spontaneous. Your intelligence functions rightly as how to do, when to do, why to do. So it is combined by this opening up of ourselves. So this is how a progressive life is lived. It can be felt, it can be practiced. There are people who practice it. There are people who find the transformation through such practices. I think I have answered the question.
She can also. She can. Do you have something to say?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take it.
It works.
I just wanted to thank Barbara for that excellent talk today. And I think it was inspired to mention Aldous Huxley and his perennial philosophy, because he sort of sums up in this beautiful book the ideals of interfaith through these great mystics throughout the ages. And you also mention another wonderful thinker, Gerald Hurd. And Hurd, and this is a comment, and then there'll be a question, and it'll be short. But Gerald Hurd came to Southern California with Aldous Huxley, I think in 1937. And Gerald had already met, or he met very soon, Swami Prabhavananda. And he introduced Aldous to Swami. And they both took to Vedanta like a house afire. And they were quick learners. And it was just a wonderful time for Vedanta in the West. And I just wanted to mention Aldous Huxley as part of the fruit of that. Then the question, Barbara, is Mary Baker Eddy is so associated with healing of the body, healing of problems of all kinds. And I wonder if you might share something about her work in this area. She said once that healing is accomplished through divine love, that there's no other power that can do it but that. But I would be interested just to know if you have any thoughts about it.
I think I mentioned that the last 100 pages of the book are accounts of people who were healed of all kinds of ailments just from reading the book. They never met her. So that would be, I'm not sure it's on, one place to start. But yes, it was something that she did almost spontaneously, as it were, from childhood. Her father used to bring her, say, the sick animals, or if there was one in a litter that was particularly, wasn't strong, didn't look like it might make it, he would bring it to her and she would nurse it back to health. But I guess, I could just tell one account that comes to mind. Actually, it was going to be in my talk, but there wasn't time. I had left it out long ago. And it's about a woman who came to visit. There was a big event at Mary Baker Eddy's home it was in Pleasant View. That was the name of her, sort of like an ashram, really. And it was in New Hampshire. And the mother had come from the Midwest with her 2 small children. And the little girl, who was about 7, had a very painful boil on her head. It had gotten larger and more inflamed as they came across the country by train, so that by the time they went that morning, it was a July 4th morning, the little girl was just in tears. Her head hurt so much. So they went through the line afterwards, through the reception line. And I just happened to have the account of the mother who told what happened in this event. Excuse me, just a moment. It's not that one. No. Here it is. Excuse me for that. So the mother, they went through the line, and the mother says, Mrs. Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy, looked at the children and then looked at me. Then she looked back at them again and threw a kiss to each one of them, and somebody told them to pass along. I followed them. I wish I could make the world know what I saw when Mrs. Eddy looked at those children. It was a revelation to me. I saw for the first time the real mother love, and I knew that I did not have it. I had a strange, agonized sense of being absolutely cut off from the children. It is impossible to put into words what the uncovering of my own lack of real mother love meant to me. As I turned in the procession and walked toward the line of trees in the front yard, there was a bird sitting on the limb of a tree, and I saw the same love poured out on that bird that I had seen flow from Mrs. Eddy to my children. I looked at the grass and the flowers, and there was the same love resting on them. The love was everywhere like the light, but it was divine, not mere human affection. I looked at the people milling around on the lawn, and I saw it poured out on them. It was not only everywhere present like the light, but it was, as Swami said, an intelligent presence that spoke to me, and I found myself weeping as I walked back and forth under the trees, saying out loud, "Why did I never know you before? Why have I not always known you?" So then her little boy calls her and says, "Mother, it's time to go home." She gets in the carriage, and the same love is everywhere. When we got back to the hotel, there was no boil on my child's head. It was just as flat as the back of her hand. And then she says that for a long time afterwards, I think it was, she doesn't say exactly, for weeks, she said, I could not bear to hear anyone speak in a cross, ill-tempered tone or do anything that would cause pain. So that is just one example. This sort of thing happened to her just frequently.
Hello. Hello, Swamijis and Barbara. Wonderful talks, great ideas regarding interfaith harmony and the efforts that have been made. Mostly I heard from Swami Veetamohananda. I hope I pronounced the name right. What my question is, you mentioned several times about all the great religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Judaism. And except a stray mention of Sufism, I hardly heard anything being mentioned about the other great religion, Islam. Is it just an accident? And I don't mean this to be a political, question. I don't. Thank you.
Yes. I am more close to Sufism, but it is not to say that we neglect the general Muslims. They do come to us, they participate in our interreligious meets. They also live with us. There is no problem as you see externally. For example, a Pakistani doctor living here, he comes every year to us. He demonstrates the namaz. Everyone participates in it. We have no any kind of hesitation in accepting the practices. Well, only difference is that they don't like to do their namaz where the representations are kept. They need an empty hall. We provide an empty hall. They are happy. We are happy. Participants are happy. So we do have connection with the general Islamic traditions as well.
What's it? I think you have to admit the fact, you cannot run away from the reality that mainstream Islam may have some doctrinal problems when when they indulge in interreligious dialogue activities with other religious traditions, especially I have myself participated in international interfaith dialogues in India. So one area of difference that they often put forward is that in Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, of course Hindu traditions, there is always some scope for somebody within the mainstream to come forward and say, we have to change. We had to give a new interpretation to some of these doctrinal principles. But in the mainstream Islam, unlike in Sufism and Baha'ism, if you call it Islam, there is not that kind of scope for a reform from within, especially for giving a new modern interpretation to the doctrinal, what we call doctrinal principles of Islam. Correct. That's the main difference. So they themselves come forward. In fact, they're very broad-minded. They're very open. They say, see, a Christian theologian can perhaps give a new interpretation to the teachings of St. Paul letters to Corinthians or Grecians, or even the New Testament itself as a whole. So also a Buddhist can give a new interpretation. And if you go to India, you find there are any number of reformers who give their own interpretations to the most fundamental teachings of Hinduism. No problem. Absolutely no problem. But in mainstream Islam, because of the emphasis, again, only in mainstream Islam, and even among the more conservative groups, there is so much of emphasis on this basic principle that every word, every comma, every single letter in the holy text is coming from God. So you have no right or the wisdom. It is totally wrong on your part to change it or to give it a new meaning in the form of a new interpretation. So that's a view. I think that also can be accommodated within the main platform of interfaith activities. That's what I just. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the day. I've been coming here for years, and it's an expanding tradition for me and my family. My question is about sacred texts. And I've always wondered, why is it that one has to say a text is divinely inspired or that it's sacred? And how is it that we are interpreting this to be divinely inspired?
Okay. Well, every religious tradition has this principle of sanctity or sacredness of the written word or spoken word, the theological literature, revealed literature. Now, the only difference, as far as my understanding of different religious traditions goes, is that in most of well-known world religions, there is always some scope to say, well, some of these ideas and teachings are of universal relevance, and they have a message and an appeal for the whole humanity, not only to those who practice that particular religion, but for the whole humanity as a whole. You know, Vivekananda used to read the Bible, and you find 4 or 5 of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples were well versed in the biblical literature. In fact, their names appear in the history of Indian Christology. See, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, of course, he was not a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, but he passed away in 1833. Sri Ramakrishna was born 1836. But Raja Ram Mohan Roy's follower, Keshav Chandra Sen, who was a great social reformer, who was a very close devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, was extremely well versed in biblical literature and was invited to England, where he gave a number of lectures. He was invited by the Unitarians and by the Anglican Church of England. And Sri Ramakrishna's chronicler, the one who wrote down his teachings, Mahendranath Gupta, was extremely well versed in biblical literature. And you find Sri Ramakrishna's, some of Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples, Swami Ramakrishna ji, Swami Sarada ji, they were great spiritual giants. They had a very intimate knowledge of the teachings of Christianity, and so too Vivekananda. So what I mean to say, they could accept Christ as a great spiritual teacher, but may not have accepted the way Christianity was interpreted by the conservative received theologians. But Gandhi was a great admirer of Jesus Christ. Aurobindo was, Radhakrishnan, of course, and quite a few of great Indian social reformers, national leaders, those who expounded Indian philosophy all over the world, beginning with Vivekananda, were very well familiar with Christianity. So what I mean to say, so too more or less with Buddhism. Many of the great exponents of Buddhism were all traditional temple-going Hindus in India. They were well-versed in Sanskrit, they were well-versed in Vedas, and they accepted Buddha as a great spiritual teacher, and accepted Buddha with the same reverence with which they accepted their own saints and sages. So, and this also goes as far as Sufism was concerned. And there was a great Sufi mystic whom Sri Ramakrishna knew, in fact, living close to Calcutta. So, and he was very broad-minded. So what I mean to say, in all scriptures, there are certain fundamental spiritual teachings which may have an appeal even for those who do not believe in God. You find sublime teachings, universalism, pluralism, and spiritual ethical philosophy, and so on. So that's why I say scriptures, certain scriptural statements which have a universal appeal and which are good for the humanity, which constitute a part of the priceless spiritual treasure of the whole humanity, was considered to be sacred. And it was coming from a non-empirical, from a transcendental, spiritual source. So naturally, those who believe in those doctrines accepted these teachings as coming from a spiritual source. So called revealed. So that's it. But you remember, Hinduism is not one of the revealed religions, nor Buddhism. Revealed religions are the three Abrahamic traditions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, with respective founders. But Buddhism is not considered to be a revealed religion in the traditional sense of that term.
That's a very good question. I was thinking it reminds me a little bit of the question I sometimes get indirectly in classes. People will wonder, well, why do we read certain texts? Why are these considered classic texts? Which is an excellent question. And the only thing that comes to me right now is, two things. One is, I think Eknath Easwaran has an excellent introduction in his book that I mentioned, God Makes the Rivers to Flow, which is really, he's answering, why have I chosen these passages for this book? Why are these considered, I don't know that he uses the word sacred text, but obviously he's chosen them for that reason. And he says basically that they stand the test of time, and that the way I think of it too, it's as he says, when you're in great need, they don't fail you. I was thinking of the beautiful song that Sarada sang about to Vivekananda, when you just are at the end of your rope, basically. There will be passages that can come to you from the Bible, I'm sure from the Quran, the Upanishad. I find so many in that book of passages that for whatever reason, it's there, and instead of when you grab a hold of it, you don't just sink to the bottom of the ocean. It somehow, it sustains you. So I think that there is, it's sort of from life experience, of course, as we are going partly on the experience of others. They're saying these texts, they what can we say? They will help you. They will be there. They will not fail you. Not, of course, if you take them just on a literal or doctrinaire point, but make them your own. So those are just two thoughts that come to me, but that's an ongoing question I think we all need to ask.
Is it on? Yeah. I come here every year because this is a safe place to be, to ask my crazy questions. I have my questions and I ask few people because not all people can understand and they think they're crazy. But I wonder, there are great masters in the world. I don't claim to be one, but I want to know who. A little closer? Okay. I want to know more about the part of myself. I'm laying there and meditating, and a voice comes to me, and it is so wise that I have to take notes. It's not from a text. It's not from Jesus. Maybe it is. But I'm not alone with this. I'm not enlightened. But I actually feel like it's so far beyond. I have a problem. I start thinking my problem, and these ideas come like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. It's not me. It's from something else. It's a thought behind the thinker. And I wonder if someone can comment about that, because it comes from a place, it's not me, it's not this body. It's something else that gives me advice that is so pure. And I don't even know if I have a question, but this is a safe place to say, who is that thought behind my thinking? Thank you.
Thank you for your beautiful explanation. So, every sacred text is the revelation. You may say how it is revelation. When everyone has the capacity to withdraw himself or herself at certain moments of their life from mundane activities or material-dominated activities, what happens is that a kind of inner harmony and inner peace starts expressing itself in them. So this inner harmony and inner peace tries to express itself, for example, as love. Let us take, for example, Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. In the ordinary level, we do not understand the meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. Same thing is mentioned in the Indian scripture, if you have known, Bhagavad Gita. You'll have to see the Lord in every heart, every being. The Lord or divine reality is there in your heart. Are you able to see it? So when we get connected to the divine reality, it is that reality that gets expressed itself to the neighbor. So we connect ourselves to that divine reality. So if the text mentioned that, is it not divine expression? In the same way, every scripture, what we call revealed scriptures, are the expressions of the inner reality expressed according to the need, temperament, and time of the people. So we need to accept them as divine realities, divine expression. Whether we apply them in our everyday life or not, it is left to the individual. But for that matter, we have no right to reject them. We have no right to criticize them. So that is how every individual has that capacity. Take, for example, poets. How the poesy comes out. If they are dominated by the material forces, it is not spontaneous. They go to the nature, get absorbed in nature, become one with the nature, spontaneously comes out the poesy. In the same way, take for example, in the Christian tradition also, it is the practice to go to solitude, or go and meditate or pray in the caves. Why do they practice? Because there they find this peace and harmony. Let us take, for example, Jesus himself climbed up to the mountain. Why did he climb up to the mountain? Because he found that harmony, purity, peace, and then whatever he gave, it has become the guideline for the common man. So every utterance, we have to take it with respect, with love. Whether we are able to love it or not, or whether we are able to apply it or not, that's a different question.
That lady was asking about some sounds she hears.
Sounds?
Should I answer?
Yes. Now, of course, I speak from the spiritual angle, what's called the inner sound. Inner sound also can be heard, but it depends upon our state of being. See, when the whole psychophysics is harmonized, a kind of vibration starts expressing itself. See, for us, the Vedantists or Buddhists, whatever it is Om. When we say Om, for example, that vibration does not touch any part of our mouth. Just spontaneously it comes. So that sound vibration is the source for all other kinds of vibration. So in reality, if you hear that sound, in reality, it is that sound that vibrates when you are in a moment of your peaceful, harmonious state of being. So if we confuse it with other things, then it may bring problems, confusion. So we need to analyze whether it comes from within or whether it is due to some other fantastic way of being in nature or being in any situation of life and all that.
I shall try to give a few ideas about what you said. You said that sound, you hear sounds, you hear somebody speaking, and you hear some wonderful ideas being spoken to you. And these ideas are coming from within. And these are all very wonderful ideas. That's what you say. Okay. Well, there is such a thing as inspiration and intuition. I'm not going to that. But there is one way to test whether it has any genuine spiritual content or not. The test is very simple. When you listen to those words, if you feel a kind of inner poise, tranquility, serenity, total restfulness, if it doesn't excite you, mind or emotions, and if it doesn't disturb your interaction with others, then it has a spiritual content. Otherwise, it could be even dangerous. It could be audio hallucinations, in fact, which are very dangerous things. So the Yoga Sutra and the commentaries on Yoga Sutra make this point very clear, called Bhranti Darsana. Darsana means just seeing, but it means also any kind of irrational visions or sounds you hear which are not genuine, which do not have a spiritual content. If it excites you, and if it makes you behave and think in a very irrational manner, getting excited, then you should totally ignore it. It is a problem. But on the other hand, if it makes you calm and quiet and serene, you feel a kind of inner spiritual enrichment, then it has a spiritual content in it. So Swami Vivekananda has a very wonderful statement in Thousand Island Park. He gives the inspired talks. He says, if somebody claims to be inspired and talks absolute nonsense, ignore him. That's an interesting statement that Vivekananda says. If somebody tells you some obviously irrational, totally unacceptable things, and if that person says he was inspired, don't listen, don't take him seriously. So that's what Vivekananda says. He doesn't refer to this particular phenomenon, but I think it applies to your ideas, what you suggested now. Yeah, thank you, that's right. Yeah, if it brings peace and tranquility, inner fulfillment, then it has a spiritual content in it. That's all.
Thank you for telling us about the children and Mrs. Eddy's healing love. I believe she said divine love always has met and always will meet every human need. My question is, how does a Christian Science practitioner heal?
That's a big question. Well, I think what you just said, it's that divine love that we all, I know, are endeavoring to draw closer to. Is it not on? Oh, okay. Oh, good. Okay. So there's not a formula, but as we all are, or as you mentioned, a practitioner, I've often thought how we're all practitioners of our spiritual practice, right? But as we grow closer or have more of that limitless love ourselves, it's kind of a natural effect of that light, as it were. I could just think of another example about this. It also relates to Mary Baker Eddy, but after all, she's the one who taught others how to live more this love. She went to they needed some chairs at their home. She went with a student to a furniture store, and the man who waited on them had a big bandage over his eye, and the student was quite intent on selecting the chairs, of course, that's why they had gone. And she was a little annoyed with Mary Baker Eddy, who didn't seem to be fully attentive. And when they asked her, well, which chairs do you like, or something, which chairs should we get, she said, well, any that we can sit on. And afterwards, the student sort of chastised her a little bit. And Mary Baker Eddy said to her, how could I think about chairs when that man, was in pain? And that's the kind of love I think we're all talking about, that we are so really far from, of course, at this point, but we do need to be, I think, more serious all the time about developing. She couldn't give her attention. And the next day, so the student went back to the store, they having made a decision, and then the first thing the man said to her was, who was that woman who was with you yesterday? He said, I had an abscess on my eye when you came. And when you left, I took the bandage off and there was no abscess. And so again, it's not that she was, seeking out these things. Her heart, like a mother, the true mother love, naturally, went out. I mean, what mother or father, for that matter, doesn't want to see their children, at peace? I mean, there may be serious lessons to learn. I'm not saying that this is just, waving a magic wand or something, but people have to go through things. But her heart went out in that way, so that it just happened. And so that's, I don't know if that answers your question adequately, but I would say it just comes back to this love, which I know everyone here, in their own way, that is what it's all about, it seems to me, what we're doing here.
Chandramani from Redding, California. Swami, thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation for all the three of you, all the three speakers. Barbara O'Brien for tracing interfaith, the things over the years in the history and the literature. Swami Tattwamayananda for explaining the grandeur of spiritual thing and the very simplistic way explaining why interfaith movement should become the way of life. And Veetamohananda it was a really heartwarming experience to see how he's spearheading interfaith movement in Europe with a very simplistic way of love and affection and sharing what they have. My question is, in this age of where there's a lot of man-made suffering because of migration of people with animosity, ethnic cleansing, and forgetting the basic principles of spirituality, and it was really heartwarming to see what Swamiji is doing in Europe and what here Vedanta is doing in Stanford with the medical Stanford graduates. I wish there were a lot more college students in this hall today, and not trying to demean any people with gray hairs, but I think we need more younger people to listen to this kind of presentation. The question is how the problem is so huge, and how we can replicate what the Swamijis are doing in multiple level, at the governmental level, organizational level, or societal level. Because I think 80% of the population they're all middle class, nice people. They don't mean to harm others. I remember from my medical school, nicest Muslim friends who are still great, nicest human beings. But I think religion is being hijacked by the fringe elements, radicals, and small by terror or violence or coercion or organized religion. So how do we as a society, we fight this so that the whole world is a nice one global village?
This morning, I mentioned I had a program in UNESCO. The question was, how are we to face all kinds of activities, undesirable activities, cruel activities that are going on in the world everywhere. As Swami Vivekananda said, education is the panacea for all evils in the society or in the world. What we mean by education, every individual is to be educated to bring about the potentiality that are there in them. It is not only for the students, it is also for the elders. Every elder has the responsibility for himself or herself to be what an ideal person should be. Well, that is imitated by the children. Children automatically, they imitate their elders. Next comes these educational institutions. In the education institutions, it should not be mere information transmission, it should be information values to transform the personalities. Can we do it? We can do it, but who can inspire such ideals? That is one question we have to put before our society, before our world. So if our little future generation is educated in a right way, according to right values, all these problems, difficulties, cruelty will disappear. Well, you may say it is all beyond our capacity or whatever it is. But every individual has one capacity to accept the higher reality. You may say, how can we accept higher realities? I'll tell you a story. There was a medical doctor. He was well known all over the country for curing the cancer. But he was not a believer. So the government decided he must be honored. He must be given a prize for his tremendous, wonderful work that he did. So from his town, he had to take a flight to the capital to attend the prize giving ceremony. He took a flight, but the flight developed some technical problem, had to be grounded far away from the capital for perhaps 400 kilometers or more. Now what to do? The fixed program is there. He cannot arrive at time. He thought he would take a car, hire a car and go. Hired a car, started driving. It was then torrential rain started pouring in him. He could not see the way rightly. So he took a wrong direction. It was late at night. He cannot reach the place. So he went and knocked at a door. The door was opened by a young woman. He said, "Sir, what do you want?" "I lost my way. I do not know where to go. Can I have a place for this night in this house?" She welcomed him. "Sir, should I serve you some food?" "Yes, if you can." So she prepared nice dinner for him, ate well. Then she said, "Sir, can you come with me to pray?" "Pray to whom?" "To God." "What is that God?" She said, "You can pray in any way you like." "Do you pray every day?" asked the doctor. "Yes, I do." "For what do you pray?" "My little child is affected by cancer. I wanted to go to that particular famous doctor. I have no means to go to that doctor. So I am praying. See here, the heart is there. Heart to the child. So that heart made her to pray, to get higher reality, to do something for her. So this doctor, he was surprised. He started shedding tears. This simple woman, full of love for her child, she wants to meet that particular doctor. It is me. Immediately told her, see, to go to the capital, I'm renouncing. I don't want any price. You come with me to my hospital. I'll treat your child. You see, here, what is called that love is the panacea for all ills. And the doctor cured the child. The one was happy, child is happy, doctor himself is happy. So, where there is heart, every problem of life is let's say, solved automatically. I think I have answered your question.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for all of your sharing. It's been wonderful. I grew up kindergarten in the Christian tradition. As far as I understand, it doesn't go on much about after one dies, except for heaven and hell. I have studied, I'm a sociocultural anthropologist by vocation, so history, been traveling around the world. I've tapped on kind of all religions, perhaps not as deep as I should, but I think Judaism also stops with death. I'm new to studying the Vedas and all of this, enjoying it. It's massive. But one of the things that I ran into, which is almost overwhelming, is the cosmology. So here you have these two traditions that more or less stop at the end of your life. And the cosmology in these Hindu Vedic traditions, you know, millions of years and around an incarnation story. So here's my question, and it doesn't matter to me whether you say it doesn't matter, or you give a little blip, or what you say. I'm not invested. My interest is, do you believe in reincarnation? And for example, I was at a Brahma Kumari retreat in Marin County, and they have an individual they call Baba, who was alive until I think the 70s, and now there's an individual, I believe she was a woman, who is supposedly, I'll use the word, channeling him. So in Christian tradition, the concern would be, you know, is this the kind of, this kind of parallels what you were talking to about this lady. You know, in the Christian tradition, it's like, watch out, you know, that could be a demonic entity, so to speak, that is coming through this person. And I guess that you would say, sir, that what applies is what you said. If what's coming through says peace and love and brotherhood, then you needn't be concerned.
Do you refer to the statement I made about the sounds, listening to sounds or words?
Yes, sir, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I wandered around. I just wanted a very brief comment from all three or any of you about your feeling about incarnation. Perhaps it isn't even important.
Reincarnation.
Well, if you are referring to my early statements, what I said was, in spiritual practice, frequently you may stumble upon some very, very undesirable problems. See, when you read books, scriptures, lives of great saints, and then when you meditate or when you pray, if without some preliminary preparations, what happens? Your mind could deceive you. In fact, a lot of fanaticism that prevailed in Europe during the Middle Ages which caused innumerable problems like Inquisition, burning at stake, all those. People suddenly getting excited, neighbors are practicing black magic, necromancy, they are worshipping the Satan. All these are associated with this sort of absolutely undesirable, dangerous spiritual practices, which manifest in the form of fanaticism, cruelty, all sorts of things. Even America is blissfully free from Salem witch hunting. If you read the history, suddenly you find in the Middle Ages, grandparents suddenly reporting to the inquisitors where the grandchildren were worshipping the Satan, and they were taken away and snatched and burnt at stake. And grandchildren betraying the grandparents betraying grandchildren. These things, if you read the history of Inquisition in the Middle Ages, you can get an example of this sort of dangerous phenomena. So Hindu Vedantic tradition and yoga tradition give certain fundamental clues so that you can judge whether your experiences, the voices you claim to hear, are genuinely spiritual, have a spiritual content or not. If they give you peace of mind, if they give you serenity, if they make you better human beings, if they helps you to look upon others with compassion, with kindness, then there is a spiritual content in it. In fact, a lot of the problems in Middle East, including with jihadis and all, suddenly getting excited, all these people are our enemies, let us slaughter. These things happened during the invasion of Spain and, of course, France also, to some extent, by the Arabs. It happened how Iran was completely Islamized. So you find fanaticism often manifesting in the form of hysteria. It's a fact, and any respectable historian of religious philosophy will admit it's a fact. You can't run away from it. Now we need not to focus too much on this. It's not necessary. But I mean to say, there is always a danger of stumbling upon undesirable consequences if we do not make some preliminary preparations before prayer meditation. So first, we should feed our mind with good ideas, good thoughts before starting meditation. Otherwise, when you meditate, undesirable images, conflicts, thoughts, all will come to the surface. And they may manifest in the form of some visions, hearing voices and hallucinations, optical and also audio hallucinations. So what we must do, we must first of all practice some fundamental moral disciplines, which in yoga psychology are called yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Shaucha, Santosha, Tapswadesha, Pranidhana. In brief, I would say non-violence, freedom from greed, no desire for possessing things that belong to others, and then a kind of inner contentment, mental purity, external, internal purity. Again, contentment. No greed, total freedom from greed, desire to possess other people's things. When you get fully established these fundamental moral disciplines, then you practice prayer and meditation in any tradition, no problem. But first of all, we must prepare our mind in these fundamental moral ethical principles. Without that, even deep contemplation can lead to problems. Not always, there's always a possibility. So what I would like to suggest to you is try to practice unselfishness, read scriptures, and feed our mind with good food. Just as we eat organic food to live for 100 years, we should feed our mind with good organic mental food. Good ideas, good thoughts, good vibrations, good, all noble, peaceful things. Then mind gets ready for meditation. Then mind will not play tricks upon us. This is one suggestion I have to give. Thank you. Okay, reincarnation, that's the next subject. As a Hinduism, Vedanta, Jainism, Buddhism, all religious traditions which had origin in Indian subcontinent do believe in reincarnation. Reincarnation means, see, whatever we do in this life, not necessarily physical actions alone, but words we speak, thoughts we think, actions we do, all these will create a kind of residual element, which is called vritti in yoga tradition. So whatever you do, when you go on doing noble deeds, slowly your mind also becomes noble. When you practice unselfishness, your mind also slowly gets spiritually, surcharged. It becomes spiritually energized. So these good thoughts, good ideas, and also evil thoughts and evil ideas also will produce some kind of an invisible result. It's called invisible. So adrishta and apurva. Adrishta means it is not visible. Apurva means it doesn't exist before you actually do it. So every action has an invisible effect, a residual effect that gets registered in your mental system. It's called vritti. It becomes a tendency, an attitude, a samskara, and a vasana. And then accordingly, you may either repeat those actions if the results are good, or avoid those actions if the results are bad. So what happens? Our mind accumulates this food, these tendencies, these impressions. So these impressions, which constitute our character, actually decide how we act, how we behave, these are subtle, real personality. So what to do? Let us feed our mind with good food, good ideas. Internet is there, print media, social media, interactions with people. All these can be used to feed our mind with good food. Good food means good tendencies, good impressions, good ideas, which will make our character noble and good. And that will influence our actions. This is how we evolve in spiritual life. Now when you die, you are born with a bag. You cannot refuse it. That bag contains two types of characteristics: good impressions and bad impressions. So when you try to do some noble deed or even noble thought, sometimes you know what happens. What you want to do, your mind will not permit you to do. You want to do certain things sincerely. Tomorrow I will pray, I will read some wonderful books. You take a decision. But at that moment, mind creates an invisible stumbling block. Mind won't permit you to do. So there's always a conflict between what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do. So how to reduce this conflict? Go on feeding the mind with good food. So conflicts will reduce slowly, and slowly your mind will cooperate with you. But remember, the point is, you are going to be born again with this bag. And this bag contains good impressions and bad impressions. So let us have a higher percentage of good impressions so that you will be born again. And when you are born again, well, let us say, suppose you have practiced some spiritual values, any tradition, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, any tradition. And if you walk in the streets and see a place, meditation center, some spiritual activities are going on there, let me step in and see what is going on. And you feel perfectly at home in that place. You know why? Because you have meditated in the past. You have practiced meditation, and that has helped you to store some good samskaras, impressions. So that prompts you to enter the place where meditation is going on. If your account is empty, then when meditation is going on there, you will have a strong temptation to come out. So I will conclude with a very interesting illustration from Sri Ramakrishna. There is no greater example. Sri Ramakrishna was living in a temple in India. So all sorts of people went to see him. Believers, non-believers, agnostics, atheists, and so on. All religious traditions had their representatives among those who went to see him. Sometimes some very good persons will come, and they will be very happy to sit there and listen to what Sri Ramakrishna was talking about spirituality, God, and so on. Some others, they will be sitting behind, they will tap the other fellows sitting, come on, let us go out. The reason is, the man sitting in front, who is immersed in listening to Sri Ramakrishna, had accumulated spiritual impressions in the past. So he is able to feel at home when Sri Ramakrishna is talking about spirituality. So he enjoys that. The other man's account is empty. So Sri Ramakrishna would say, well, you, those who do not want to sit there, Sri Ramakrishna would say, you go out and see this wonderful garden, trees, temples, all that you can enjoy. Let this man sit there. So Sri Ramakrishna knew. So there are two categories. That means those who have done some spiritual practice, prayed a few times, maybe meditated a few times, some spiritual practices, they will feel happy when they're listening to Sri Ramakrishna. Others who have not done much, they will be terribly bored, so they want to come out and see the garden, the trees. That's the difference.
Swami Veetamohananda ji. Veetamohananda ji.
Thank you.
In your experience with the projects you're working on, you cited Swami Vivekananda ji's teachings on the importance of education. You mentioned it as a panacea for some of the issues that arise in social discourse, and you suggested, I believe, that a sustained remedy to some of the problems of conflict depend upon values education and the encouragement of universal ethical humanism and a principled spirituality. But my question is, since there are many views on this, and much of the social discourse and much of the educational process, whether it's within families, whether it's between faith traditions or in institutions like schools, universities, and the like, all of the conditioning has a heavy dose of the materialistic. And when one tries to introduce some perhaps more elevated principles, there's a fair amount of resistance. So in your experience, what is the best way of urging what we might agree is the panacea to which you spoke?
Yeah, it is true. Present day younger generation is dominated by the materialistic ideas, ideals, gadgets, and all sorts of equipments which depersonalizes, you may say, the gadgets, therefore education. But how much we are using those gadgets for personality development? Say, for example, if parents are not there at home, if children are alone, they take up their gadgets, play all kinds of, let us say, play, which projects unreality, but there is cruelty. Does it not affect the individual, the personality? Now, in what way that type of education is helpful to the child? And then, it is true that is beyond the parents' control, but it is not beyond the control of the parents. Parents can change the personality, the child, through love, through ideal living. For example, if the parents are habituated to watch the TV, they say, no, I don't want to watch the TV because all that is projected is not real. It's all what's called social psychology dominated projections. So in what way it brings any good to me or to my child? So when the parents resist themselves from those activities, child automatically has to follow their parents. And then it is true, we take children to on holidays, and we busy ourselves leaving children to play. What type of play do they play? Either with the gadgets or with all kinds of children who are not trained in the same way as you train up your children. So they are influenced. Cannot the parents control the children? No, you have to do this, my child. You have this capacity. You have to progress. You have to become this. You can do it. Are we able to inspire them with self-confidence? Also, we can observe when they ask us questions. Do we really answer the questions in the right way? Well, sometimes we have no time, go to your mom. Mom says, I'm busy. What the child can do. So when the child comes, we must give the time for the child. Child is important. Why is child is important? Child is yourself. So here comes the question of reincarnation or rebirth. You are born again. So if you are born again, you love yourself. Your child is yourself. If you want your child to grow up in the way you think, then you must know as how to educate the child yourself in the right way. Well then, you may say it is the responsibility of the teachers. After all, how many hours per day the child spends the time with the teacher? Does the teacher has enough patience and time to look into the need and temperament of the child and correct the child? Whereas parents can do it. So it is why parents have greatest responsibility for their children, because they are themselves expressing themselves as their child. So that is why in Sanskrit there is a beautiful expression, Atmaja, born of the self. So if it is yourself, if the child has to bring you joy, then we need to give joy to the child. So if the parents are able to do it, even if the child is at school, even if the child is influenced by the materialistic world or whatever it is, it has the capacity to say, no, I don't want. My mom or dad, they don't accept it, they don't like it. I want to bring happiness to my parents. So you see how the real education expresses itself in the personality.
This question is for Swami Veetamohananda. It's a follow-up question to the question on evolution, where you talked about energy, luminosity, harmony, and love, and you mentioned that there are practices, and I wondered whether those are a part of traditional Vedanta And I'm assuming it's some sort of energy practice.
Yes, in a way, these aspects are expressed in the Vedanta. For example, there is this one word, Bhagavan. Bhaga means aspects or parts. So, who is Bhagavan or God? Or what is God? The God reality expresses all these aspects. So, that is why yesterday I think I said, God doesn't want you to call him in a particular name or form, but it is you who want it. So, if you want that, then you have the liberty to direct your consciousness to these aspects, even without form. You need not name it. Just connect your consciousness to infinity, which has no limit. And when you connect your consciousness to this infinite reality, what is called material vibrations cannot affect it. It just goes underneath. Now, in the same way, you can go on intensifying that consciousness with the luminosity, beauty, love, intelligence, knowledge. You know it very well. As you think, so you become. So it is possible for us to become that. Yesterday, I think yesterday or day before yesterday, I quoted a verse from the Bhagavatam, a gopi, a cowherd woman. She was constantly thinking of her Lord Krishna, or Sarada sang a song. Her entire being has transformed into that reality. Another woman comes, she talks to the other woman only about Krishna, or Lord, or God. And she says, Pashyata Krishnoyam. Look, I am Krishna himself, means that reality itself. How the consciousness becomes that. So, you may have a support for your consciousness, you may not have a support, perfectly all right. What is called, instead of directing the I consciousness towards the material domain, you are directing to the infinite reality. So to that extent, you become that. So in reality, that is meditation. Also, in the higher sense, it is contemplation. So you may question whether this way of transforming ourselves will be more effective in our everyday life. Yes. Inner harmony, inner peace becomes intense. With that peace and harmony, whatever you do becomes perfect. Our activities do not become perfect because heart is elsewhere, thinking is different way goes, action is third. Whereas with this, the unity is brought about. With that unity, whatever you do becomes perfect. The heart and intelligence are joined together and it becomes the action, right action.
One of the problems that plaguing America nowadays is the shootings in schools. And everybody has his own opinion about what's causing it. Some of them put the blame on the gun and the NRA, and others put the blame on what they're teaching in school or not teaching. And some of them saying, well, it could be the social media, the availability that's plaguing America and the influence of that. In your opinion, what can you contribute, and what really the spiritual side, that in your understanding, what can contribute mainly, hugely, to solving that problem? And I would like to hear from Barbara too, from the Christian side. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, just first word that comes to mind, I was in my talk about sympathy. I think we really have lost that that power of sympathy in our culture. I shouldn't say lost it. You certainly do see it, but it doesn't seem very highly valued. And it's something I was thinking, listening to all these wonderful questions and comments, and the one that the doctor asked earlier. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but I think we underestimate or don't take seriously enough the individual work that we each need to do, kind of taking a reading thermometer, whatever it would be, as it were, how is my, what temperature am I at with, say, divine love? Or, sometimes, I'm just speaking personally here for the moment, I will realize that I have a certain degree of impatience. I'll find that something annoys me. And I like to try to then really pay attention to that, because that's not a good sign. And I think that we need to be much more conscious of this sort of thing. I was thinking of a wonderful passage from Ramana Maharshi, where he says to the effect that the sage, or that could be any of us, basically benefits the world by just being kind of in the self. And that can sound like a very high order, but I really do think we have many examples of people who are making that endeavor to live more the kind of lives that I was talking about a bit today. And we have to do this. There isn't some other solution. We do need to, I'm speaking again very personally, we do have to do something about gun control, in my opinion. There's no question about that. But things get out of control. We have to start from the top, as it were, or from within. If we are not in order in our own hearts and minds, we can tell our children anything, as we all know, and it's not, doesn't have an effect. It has to be something that we are ourselves. I'm thinking of a wonderful story I read years ago. Some of you may know what Swami this was. It was many years ago. But a mother brought her child. She wanted the child to stop eating so much candy, so much sugar. So she took him to the Swami, and the Swami said something, I may not have it entirely right, but the idea was, come back in a few days, or a few weeks it might have been. And so they did, and then he told the little child that he shouldn't eat so much candy. And he took it seriously, and the mother said, why did we have to make this long journey to come back, to see you? And he said, well, when you came, he said, I ate lots of candy or I ate lots of sugar, And so he, that's, I think, what I'm sort of talking about. And I think, just mentioning about what that doctor question I asked earlier about this, the young people and religion being hijacked, that certainly is true to a degree. I really question how real that is. We get told a lot of, as we know, stuff on the media that isn't necessarily accurate. And my experience working with students, they inspire me every year when I work with them. And yes, there are all these problems. We heard beautifully from the young people yesterday about technology. It's an ongoing struggle for everyone and something that we have to individually, resolve. But I think we really have to do it ourselves, much more, take it, and the influence of that, what we heard, the power of a scientific right thought, fills immensity. What did we hear about the sages that would go into the cave and think 5 right thoughts or 6 or whatever it was? This is what changes history and societies. And I know for myself, I think, how often do I do that? But I think we are an immense possibility for change, I would say, for transformation. If, I don't mean that to sound probably like a harangue, I don't mean it that way, but just, I'll speak to myself. I keep trying to do better and better at this. So it's kind of a long answer, but that's such an important question you asked. And you think of all the seems like so many young people and vets. These are people, that we have not taken seriously. We know we don't in our culture. We pay tribute to power and so on. We have to, take care of our young, our old, our sick, and the sick warriors that return as well. Anyway. Thank you.
So we have time for just one more question. Okay. We have to wind up by 4:45. One more question.
Is it okay? Thank you so much for a beautiful program. My question is, given the immense economic, social problems and violence in our culture, it seems to me that the most potent way of counteracting that is by values education, which has been spoken of in various ways by all 3 of you, but in a very concerted way so that it is as important as reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I know Karen Armstrong, the religious historian, had started a group of compassion schools in Pakistan. But in this country, in our own homeland, if this could somehow be interwoven in education in the earliest grades, starting in 2nd or 3rd grades, values education that they had in earlier generations, in my mother's generation, I just wondered if you think this could be really the most potent way, because it would counteract dysfunction in our homes by the families and so forth and so on. So, thank you.
Well, related to this gun violence, I would say the most important problem is the collapse of family structure. Teachers can't do much. The real education should begin at home. When at least for some years children they have to be dependent upon the family, parents for the protection. I've read somewhere that to begin with, the parents pamper the children, and then after some years they let them go away from the family. So this sort of pendulum moving from one end to the other end. These are the very root of America's problem. Of course, if you allow children to be independent to that extent quite early in their life, there are certain advantages: self-reliance, innovation, compared to many of the Asian family societies, where children, not now, of course, till about 30 years back, grandchildren took instructions from the grandparents on which university to join, what course to choose the university. Not now anymore, fortunately. But in America, I think it is a kind of freedom gone wild. Freedom gone wild. That's a problem. On the one hand, parents get obsessed with protecting their children, so much of affection. On the other hand, they don't give to children something that will help children to grow as responsible sons and daughters. What you give to the children, they give you back. So I can just quote one convocation address from an ancient Vedic school. In the early days, children used to be sent to Vedic hermitages. And after the Vedic education, they will be given a convocation address. The convocation address has many segments, many parts. One dealing with philosophy, ethics. The other one dealing with family life. Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara, all these deal with ethical, moral, spiritual ideas. The second part of the convocation directly deals with family. How they should become responsible husbands and wives, responsible daughters, sons and daughters, responsible parents, mother and father. Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, Aditi Devo Bhava. That is the instruction. It's very 4 lines you find. You must learn to respect your parents. It's a figurative, metaphoric language. As much as you revere, respect God Himself. It's a figurative language, which means you should respect your parents, your teacher, and also, of course, guests. I'm not coming to that. But respect for parents on the part of children and looking upon children, bringing up children with a sense of sacredness and sanctity that you attach to family relationship. Not dollar-oriented, ultra-conservative, pragmatic, utilitarian interpretation of family ties. But rather, family relationship should be built upon the rock of a sense of sanctity and sacredness that you attach to the filial relationship. That's one solid foundation. On that foundation, you can build up teaching values and so on. Otherwise, it's not going to work. What parents give to child, that's the first kind of education. That's the very foundation on which the child builds his or her character and personality and attitudes. Okay. Okay, I think you have something to say. Barbara, she's an academic. She was teaching children for decades. So she may have something to say. I would be happy.
Well, I don't know that I really have something to say about whether we should, have sounded like maybe a separate program for value education. I guess I was just thinking that we really can teach values through the subjects that we already have, through everything. That certainly seemed to me was also an ancient practice, whether you're studying mathematics or music. All of these are full of value and inquiry. That it's the way that they're taught. And just in my own field of literature, that's certainly what we're doing in class, and it's the material itself that prompts these very deep questions, which sort of makes me think of another idea, which is that I read somewhere, but that religion isn't just somebody necessarily who asks religious questions. It's asking the deep questions about whatever it is that you're doing, and with great seriousness. And so it really is that interfaith experience, as it were, that everything we're doing is truly a spiritual practice. And so that's
Swami Veetamohananda ji would like to say something related to this subject from his experience in Europe.
In France, we don't have such problems. And also, in the educational system, they have got a system to keep up the contact with the parents. Every month, or once in 2 months or 3 months, the teachers contact the parents and give the report how the child has progressed or how the child is neglecting the studies and all that. So it is the responsibility of the parents to correct the child. That is one system, seems to be working very well. There is interaction always between the parents and the teachers. And in Germany, a little bit of violence is there, but it's not this kind of violence. There also, they have got the same system, the interaction between the parents and the teachers. The Spain also same, Italy also same. So that system seems to be working. Well then, whether we can introduce value education in the schools, it's a bit problematic question or issue, because when we say value, immediately they relate it to the religion. Every religion has its value. Which value will you give them? So what they have done is that they have got a system, what's called philosophy class. So every child has to undergo that philosophical class. Now it is the responsibility of the philosophy teacher or professor to correct the individual. For example, we have a philosophical teacher staying in our ashrama. He goes to this school. He knows the problem of the children. Also, he knows how to tackle those children through the Vedantic values. He doesn't say it is Vedantic values or whatever it is. No, this is good for you. You have to do it. So that is how he tries to correct the children, tries to give them right direction. So in the same way, perhaps we have to adopt certain such techniques to bring about better education system or whatever it is.
Thank you. Now we will have a meditation for 5 minutes. After that, we'll have vote of thanks. So please be meditation. Veetamohananda ji, who is a minister in charge of Vedanta Center in Gretz, France, and Barbara O'Brien, who is a lifelong student of Vedanta and a devotee of Vedanta Society. So I take this opportunity to thank both of them, and also the two musicians who came from Paris along with Swamiji, Naren and Sarada. So I take this opportunity to thank them. And also my thanks to all these monks, visitors, Swami Parapanananda ji, Prasannatmananda ji, Siddhyananda, and Swami Onkarananda ji, who came from Vedrig Ashrama, and Swami Vedananda ji, of course, who was very active throughout, and also all the nuns, devotees, friends and volunteers who have been working for the last several weeks to make this program a reality and a success. Now we will have Shanti Mantra. One announcement that I want to make before that is that we will have buffet dinner right now. And before that, for some time, if any of you wants to meet the speakers and discuss certain things, you are most welcome. For some time, you can meet the speakers and discuss with them. And one important announcement, those of you who do not know about this, we have a monthly program in Sunnyvale Community Center every second Sunday from 4:15 to 5:30. We have a lecture program there. So thank you, all of you, and let us meet again next time. We have Shanti Mantra now. Thank you. Om Apyayantu mama angani vak pranaschakshrusrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam maham brahma nirakuryam mama brahma nirakarut anirakaranamastu anirakaranam me astu Tadatmani niradeya upanishadsu dharmaste mayi santu te mayi santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om may Brahman protect us. May Brahman protect the preceptor and the disciple. May the absolute reality, the divine reality present in everyone and everywhere, protect us and fill this world with peace and happiness for everyone. Om peace, peace, peace.